Hello besties, welcome or welcome back to my channel. Today we're talking about all things September. We're talking about my September TBR and we are doing my September bullet journal spread. So we're gonna start with my TBR list. We're gonna talk about a new vlog series that I'm gonna be doing on my channel starting in September and carrying through December. So I hope that you're excited. If you are, please be sure to give this video a big thumbs up, subscribe to my channel. Let's talk about some books. This month, and I think I'm gonna do this going forward and just see how well it works for me, but I've broken my TBR into 4 categories. I've done physical TBR, new releases, Libby/Everend, and KU. These are, I mean, I read from these pretty much every month anyways, but I think being a little bit more conscious of my physical TBR and new release books that I really want to read will be helpful, because my Libby holds tend to overwhelm me and then I just sink my entire month into focusing on those. And these poor books on my TBR cart are like, excuse me, we've been sitting here for months and months and you haven't read us or touched us. And I want to read more of my physical TBR. Same thing happens with KU. Like, I just get overwhelmed and taken over by Kindle Unlimited and then I just ignore all of my other books. So I'm hoping that this will be a little bit more intentional. And we're gonna start with my physical TBR. I hope to read in September, because that vlog series that I mentioned, I'm going to be reading my entire physical TBR by December of this year. So I've had some of these books sitting on this cart for a year and a half. Probably pretty close to 2 years, some of them, not all of them. Like I mentioned, my goal by December is to have an empty TBR cart, which I know sounds absolutely insane and wild, but really and truly, I'm going to force myself. If there's any books on here that I haven't read, I'm unhauling them. We are cutthroat with this challenge. All that to say, let's start with the books that are on my physical TBR that I'm planning to read for September. So I have Reckless, but I have ordered Powerless and Hopeless in the Chestnut Spring series. Basically, I read Heartless, I gave it 5 stars, literally loved it so much in August, and now I want to binge read the series. Then we have a series that I have been dying to finish for the last like 2 years. The last book in the series just came out, but I realized I needed a reread, so that is the A Touch of Darkness series. I still have A Touch of Malice by Scarlett St. Clair that I need to reread, and I have the audiobook for this as well. Just as my final refresher before we jump into the final book, A Touch of Chaos by Scarlett St. Clair. I have been waiting, not so patiently, 2 years for this book to come out, so we're finally here. This book looks way chunkier than it is. It's only 550 pages, well, close to 600 pages, but it looks way longer than that, does it not? Anyways, so these 2 are on the physical TBR. Okay, this one is a little bit unhinged, and I never know how to give like a proper synopsis for this book because it's so weird, but like I read it 2 years ago now probably. It's Nightshade by Carrie Lake. I read this on Kindle Unlimited first, feral for it, and immediately ordered the physical copies. This is a duology, so I do have the second book down here as well. I never ended up reading the second book, and now like I absolutely know that I need a reread before I can finish this duology. I hope to read Nightshade in September, and then I would like to read Infernium in October. This book is very unhinged. It's a dark romance. We follow our main character whose dad did a bunch of research into the supernatural, and he believed that there was this veiled world, kind of like a purgatory, but they call it Nightshade. He believed in this purgatory veiled world of Nightshade, and nobody else believed him, and he kind of went crazy over it, and I think that he took his own life eventually because he was just so consumed by this theory that no one believed him. And our main character, Farron, ends up finding her way into Nightshade, this peculiar place where I first met the cold and callous recluse living in a decaying cliffside cathedral. Jericho Van Croy is the epitome of everything I have been told to fear, a raven-winged harbinger who wears intrigue like a warm black cloak, an enigma that I'm determined to unravel, even if it means getting closer than I should. One touch is forbidden. Even so much as a kiss would be my demise. But the sin on his lips burns me up like a wild flame, and his growing infatuation weakens my resolve. Giving him what he wants, though, will mean no chance for redemption or escape. It just fully consumed me the first time I read it. I gave it 5 stars. I'm very curious if my reading taste has changed since I first read this book and if I would still give it 5 stars. And then, like I mentioned, I would like to just finish the series because I own these 2 books. These are the books that have been sitting on my TBR cart for probably 1.5 to 2 years. Another reread for me is The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshani Chokshi. This is a book that I first read on audio and I loved it. I gave it either a 4 or a 5 star, but the whole time I was listening to the audiobook, I was saying, I need to read this physically because the writing style is so beautiful. If you love a little bit more of a wordy, very descriptive, extremely lyrical writing style, you would love this book. It's also narrated by Steve West, who is my favorite audiobook narrator, and I would love to just immersive read, re-listen to that man because I'm obsessed with him, but also be able to annotate and like fully immerse myself in this writing style because really and truly, writing styles like this do something to my soul. Like, I love them so stinking much. This is a book that's compared to Starling House. I also gave Starling House 5 stars. And it's very gothic and dark. It's a very atmospheric read, I think, for September or October. So we follow a man who believed in fairy tales. He marries a beautiful, mysterious woman named Indigo Maxwell Castañeda. He was a scholar of myths. She was an heiress. In exchange for her love, Indigo extracted a promise that her bridegroom would never pry into her past. But when the couple returns to Indigo's childhood home, the House of Dreams, the bridegroom will soon find himself unable to resist. For within the crumbling manor's extravagant rooms lurks the shadow of another girl, Azure, I think that's how you say it, Indigo's dearest childhood friend, who suddenly disappeared. As the house slowly reveals his wife's secrets, the bridegroom will be forced to choose between reality and fantasy, even if doing so threatens to destroy their marriage or their lives. So that's the physical TBR. I feel like that's very doable, but then I have the new releases section next. I am planning on buying these physically, so it's kind of like a combo, but I don't have them quite yet. So the first one is Immortal Dark, which I cannot stinking wait for. It's one of my most anticipated releases for the year. This is our Who Did This To You book club pick for September. That is the book club that I run on Fable. It's free to join. It's always linked in the description box below. We read fantasy romance and we vote on it together every single month, and we chat about it as we go. There's no harsh deadlines. We put our reviews in the little review section at the end of the month, and it's a really good time. So we voted on Immortal Dark. This book is pitched as The Cruel Prince meets Ninth House. I literally don't need to hear anything else. Like, if you know me, if you know my reading taste, that is a bit of me. But to give a little bit more backstory and context, this is by Taijist Gurma. It is the first book in a planned dark trilogy, which I can't stick and wait for. A lost heiress must infiltrate an arcane society and live with the vampire she suspects killed her family and kidnapped her sister. Do you need to hear anything else? Like, vampires, it's giving a dark academia type setting. I don't know if it's dark academia, but it's like kind of an occult arcane society. Like, I don't know what that means, but I'm so here for it. And then the 2 other new releases, I'm sorry, I have mentioned these books in my fall like book releases video that I just did recently, so I will link that up above and down below. Lost in Ruins by Rachel Moore is another most anticipated release that comes out in September. This is a YA fantasy. I fell in love with Rachel Moore's writing when I read Library of Shadows, which is also such an amazing fall book. If you like YA fantasy and you want to read about a girl falling in love with a ghost boy in a library, it's so good. Anyways, Us in Ruins is about our protagonist. She is studying this cursed broken vase from, I want to say, ancient Rome. Hopefully I have that correct. She's going on a journey to this archaeological site. She's trying to find more about this vase, and she comes across this 100-year-old journal from this boy who 100 years ago was also researching and looking for this cursed ancient vase. She ends up following his notes, following his journal into these ruins, and she comes across a statue that looks mysteriously just like the boy who wrote the journal. This statue comes to life. It is him, he is it, and they go on this journey together to figure out and find and fix this cursed ancient vase and probably fall in love with each other. And then the last new release that I have for September is A Dark and Drowning Tide. This is by Allison Saft. Okay, I read A Far Wilder Magic and I loved the premise of it. Like, I loved the premise of it. I couldn't deal with the pacing. It was so slow, and usually that doesn't bother me, but I just like couldn't get through A Far Wilder Magic, and I was so upset about it. It was my first Allison Saft book, and I said I'm going to give her another try. If she comes out with another book, I'm going to give her another try. This is my second try for Allison Saft. I want to love her. This is another book that seems so atmospheric for September and for fall in general. We have a sharp-tongued folklorist who must pair up with her academic rival to solve their mentor's murder in this lush and enthralling sapphic fantasy romance. The main character's name is Lorelei, which already off to a great start because it's just so like Gilmore Girls reminiscent for me. They're basically going on this expedition with 6 eccentric nobles in search of a fabled spring, but they have like things in the forest, creepy deeps in the forest that are kind of like hunting them or like making them feel uncomfortable. They feel like they're being watched, and then their mentor, who is leading this expedition, gets murdered, and they have to like solve this murder but also continue their expedition. The suspects are her 5 remaining expedition mates, each with their own motive. The only person Lorelei knows must be innocent is her longtime academic rival, the insufferably gallant and maddeningly beautiful Sylvia von Wolf. Now in charge of the expedition, Lorelei must find the spring before the murderer strikes again and a coup begins in earnest. It's like giving, I don't know if you can call it cozy, but it's giving murder mystery, dark folklore, fairy tale, and sapphic academic rivals. Like, all of my keywords are there. Next category is my Libby and Everin holds. I'm putting these in the same category because I feel like, why not? There's an author I have been very curious to read from called Juliette Marillier. She writes like adult historical fantasy, and it's fantasy romance. These books were released, I think, in the late 90s, and to me, it just feels like she was one of the founding women of fantasy romance, and I've also heard good things about her books. So I have Dreamer's Pool on my September TBR. It says that she weaves magic, mythology, and folklore into every sentence on the page. Again, that sounds like a bit of me. This is the first book to the Blackthorn and Grimm series. This takes place in ancient Ireland. In exchange for help escaping her long and wrongful imprisonment, embittered magical healer Blackthorn has vowed to set aside her bid for vengeance against the man who destroyed all that she once held dear. Followed by a former prison mate, a silent hulk of a man named Grimm, she travels north to Dalriada. There she'll live on the fringe of a mysterious forest, duty-bound for 7 years to assist anyone who asks for help. Orin, Crown Prince of Dalriada, has waited anxiously for the arrival of his future bride, Lady Phlidis. He knows her only from a portrait and sweetly poetic correspondence that have convinced him Phlidis is his destined true love. But Orin discovers letters can lie, for although his intended exactly resembles her portrait, her brutality upon arrival proves she's nothing like the sensitive woman of the letters. With the strategic marriage imminent, Orin sees no way out of his dilemma. Word has spread that Blackthorn possesses a remarkable gift for solving knotty problems, so the prince asks her for her help. To save Orin from his treacherous nuptials, Blackthorn and Grimm will need all their resources, courage, ingenuity, leaps of dedication, and more than a little magic. I know that probably won't be everybody's cup of tea. I also am very not sure if it's going to be my cup of tea, which is why I've waited to get these books on Libby. I want to like try her writing style before I commit to like potentially buying her books and whatever. But these books, they were published so long ago that like you really can't find them on Kindle Unlimited. I had to wait until they became available at my library in order to sample them without like having to purchase it because they literally weren't anywhere else. So we will see how my little taste test of Juliet goes. And then also on my Libby/Everett, I have Archangel's Blade, which is the 4th book in the Guild Hunter series, which y'all know I'm freaking obsessed with. It's just, I don't marathon series, so it's taking me a while to get to the 4th book. Me and my friend Bailey from Bae's Reads are buddy reading the series together. I have this book on audio and I'm so curious. This 4th book, we follow a different couple from the first 3 books. So I think that will be very interesting. I don't really know what we're in for. And then my last 2 are on KU. I will briefly mention them because I feel like these books are quite talked about in the book community right now, but I would like to get to Glow of the Everflame. Everyone says that this is like their favorite book of the series, basically. The 1st book didn't hit as hard as I was hoping that it would for me. However, I'm hopeful. Like, I believe in the hype. I believe everyone is screaming about the series for a reason. So fingers crossed that Glow will go a little bit better than the 1st book did for me, but I need to know. Like, I have such FOMO. I need to know what's going on. And then the final book that's on my September TBR, this is a carryover from, I think July, maybe June or July, Beyond the Aching Door by Victoria Meir. This is a book that's pitched as a mix of Study in Drowning and Divine Rivals. That's what I've heard it pitched as. Sounds right up my alley. It's just long. That's the only thing that has been deterring me from picking it up or not prioritizing it. I think it's 600 or maybe a little bit more than 600 pages. It's quite a chunky one, and I've been getting it back into that fear of like chunky books lately, just due to like time restraints, but we're getting over that. We are reading books because we're interested in them, because we are excited to read them. We're not going to worry about page length in September. So those are my, I think it's like 10 books for September. So let me know in the comments down below. Do you have any of these books on your TBR? Are there any books in September that you're super excited for that I didn't even mention at all? What are your reading vibes going into fall? I have never been more excited for fall in my whole life than I am this year. Like, I always love fall, but this year it just feels like next level extra. So with that, we're gonna get into my September bullet journal setup.